Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to the world of Alexander McCall Smith and his The Number One Ladies Detective Agency. The first book in that series really makes you feel like you're right there in Botswana.
You're so right. It really does. Even something as simple as the bush tea,
The bush tea.
McCall Smith makes you practically paste it. Just through Mma Ramotswe's descriptions. It's amazing. It's like he took everything that's special about Botswana and put it right there on the pages.
It's not even just like the big descriptions, like obviously he describes the landscape, but it's the little things that he throws in.
Yeah, like what?
Like how outside Mma Ramotswe's door, there's this acacia tree.
Right.
But it's not just an acacia tree. He's very specific that it's a thorn tree.
Oh, yeah.
And he even mentions that they thrive on the edges of the Kalahari.
It's almost like a character, that thorn tree.
Yeah.
Just standing there watching everything, all the people coming and going, Mma Ramotswe and her clients. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think of how tough the people in Botswana are.
Yeah. And then there's how often he mentions those blue distances.
Oh, yeah.
And when I read it, I could just feel that heat coming off the sand. And how huge the Kalahari is. It just stretches on forever.
I know. And the sounds, too. The go-away bird. Like, you hear it all the time in the book. It's almost like the soundtrack to Mma Ramotswe's life.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of soundtracks, I wanted to ask you about Obed Ramotswe. Mma Ramotswe's dad, he was a cattle farmer, right?
He was.
And it seemed like cattle are a really big deal over there in Botswana.
Oh, yeah. They're essential. I mean,
Sure.
more than just a big deal. For Obed, having his herd, it wasn't just about, money. It was about who he was as a Botswana.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cattle in Botswana, they represent family. They represent your place in society. They even connect you to your ancestors.
Yeah. And there was this one part where he compares people to their cattle. Like, he said something like, thin, wretched cattle have thin, wretched owners.
Oh, yeah.
And it just seemed like, at first I thought it was like a funny little saying, but maybe it means more than that.
It definitely does. It shows just how connected people are to their animals there.
Mm.
It's deeper than just, what they're worth. It's about their values, what kind of person you are. It all comes out.
Yeah. It makes you realize how different life is for everyone all over the world. Depending on where you are, your culture, everything.
Right. So let's talk about Precious Ramotswe.
Yeah,
What an amazing woman. Did you know she was basically like a math genius?
I did. Yeah, she mentioned how numbers just came naturally to her, and that's how she ended up doing so well in a career that's, mostly men. But there were times when she hinted that it wasn't always easy being a woman in that kind of job.
That's true. A lot of women still struggle with that.
Yeah,
But Mma Ramotswe, she never lets those limitations stop her.
she doesn't.
No. She knows they're there, but she keeps going.
It's like that saying, bloom where you're planted. She just made the best of everything she had and eventually got to use all that money smarts of hers to start her own agency.
Right, the detective agency. And just doing that, starting her own business, says so much about her. It's like she's declaring her independence. Like she's saying, I'm going to do what I want, society.
And that takes us to her very first case, Happy Bapetsi.
Oh, wow.
What a wild story. This successful businesswoman being taken advantage of by a guy claiming to be her dad.
That case really shows you how different Mma Ramotswe is as a detective.
Yeah.
She doesn't just, use force or scare people.
She doesn't.
No. She uses her intelligence. She figures people out.
Yeah.
And then she's smart about how she uses that information. It's how she exposed that fake dad.
Yeah, it was amazing how she knew all about local customs and how people acted, and she used it all to her advantage. It wasn't just about closing the case, it was about making sure everything was fair and everyone felt okay.
Exactly. Exposing the truth wasn't enough. Mma Ramotswe wanted Happy Bapetsi to feel strong and in control again, to move on with her life.
So we've talked about Mma Ramotswe now, but what about her past? Especially her dad. He seemed to play a big part in who she is today.
Oh, definitely. Obed Ramotswe's stories about working in those South African mines, they show us a pretty dark time in Botswana's history. Danger, discrimination, missing home all the time. It's a reminder of how much those men sacrificed to take care of their families.
It is. There's something so sad about his story, especially that part where a Zulu miner asks him to come to Zululand,
I remember that.
promises him an easy life, surrounded by beauty. But Obed chooses to go back to Botswana, his home.
That really tells you something about him, how much he loved his country. It shows us that nothing, not even an easier life, could replace that sense of belonging. And I think that feeling runs through the whole book, this idea that you can be happy and find meaning in the things, even when things are hard.
Yeah, and you see that same love and sense of responsibility in how he felt about Precious, working so hard in those mines. Also, he could give her a good future, even though it meant being away.
He clearly loved her very much, and because of his hard work, she's able to do all the things she does. Like starting that detective agency. It shows how important his legacy is.
But it wasn't just about the money, was it? He taught her right from wrong.
Oh, yeah. He gave her a strong sense of values.
And then you have the cousin who looked after her when he was away. She really pushed education. And having a strong moral compass, she knew it was important for women to have a voice.
It is.
And that's something you see all through the book, isn't it? This idea of women finding their place in the world, speaking up.
You're right. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. And it makes you think even more about what happens next in Precious's life. I mean, her marriage to Noto Mokati, that jazz musician, talk about a wild ride.
Oh, tell me about it.
It starts out all romantic, right? But then he gets controlling, abusive. It's a far cry from the love and support she had from her father.
That's for sure. And then losing their child, too. That's just awful. It's amazing she wasn't completely broken by it all.
It really is.
But she takes what her dad left her, the money from his cattle, and starts the #1 ladies detective agency. She turned all that pain into something good. It's like she found a way to help others find peace and justice because of what she went through.
That's a really beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah.
And as we keep going with this deep dive, remember, this is just the start of Mma Ramotswe's story. There are a lot more cases to solve, a lot more secrets to uncover, and we get to learn so much more about Botswana, its culture, its history.
Well, I can't wait.
Me neither. It really makes you think, Botswana's changing too. It's like they're trying to figure out who they are as a country after becoming independent.
Yeah, you're right. It's there, under the surface. Things are shifting, especially for women. Their roles are changing.
Remember what Precious's cousin said about how women will have more power one day?
Yeah.
But they need to be able to read. It's such a small thing to say, but it means so much. It's like everyone wants things to be fairer.
It makes you think about how it's all connected. Mma Ramotswe is going through all these personal things, like her marriage ending, and at the same time, her whole country is going through big changes. Botswana's trying to be modern, but also hold on to their traditions.
Yeah, and speaking of traditions, remember how McCall Smith puts in all those little details, like Precious's cousin being really strict about traditional greetings? It shows you that Botswana's changing, yeah, but the old ways are still so important to them.
It's what makes it so interesting, you see modern things like cars and businesses, but then there are these old customs and beliefs that are still so strong.
It's like what Obed said about cattle and their owners.
Oh, yeah.
Thin, wretched cattle. You get thin, wretched owners. It sounds funny, but it shows you how deeply they think about things in Botswana. Cattle are more than just animals. They're like a reflection of the people.
You really get a sense that cattle are at the heart of everything in Botswana. It's not just the money, it's their whole way of life, what they believe in, their history.
It is. So have you thought about this case with the missing boy?
The one from Katsana.
Yeah, the one where the dad wrote that letter.
Yeah.
It really pushes Mma Ramotswe, It's a big challenge.
I know. She even says herself that she probably can't do much. I mean, the dad probably knows that area way better than she does. But she doesn't give up.
She doesn't.
She really wants to help.
It's part of who she is, that kindness. She writes back to the dad, tells him she'll keep an ear out. It's just a little thing, but it means a lot.
Yeah, it does. And you can see her changing, too, growing as a detective. This case forces her to do things she hasn't done before, go places she doesn't know.
It does. Remember that part where she's driving and she's sure there's a snake under the van?
Oh, yeah.
The way McCall Smith writes it. It's like
no.
you feel that fear with her. You're just waiting for that snake to appear.
Oh, I know. I was so nervous for her. And then she jumps out of the van terrified, but there's nothing there. It was all in her head.
It's funny, in a way, but it shows you how brave she is. She faced her fear, even though it wasn't real in the end.
It does, but then you get to that case with Solomon Moretzi. That was pretty dark.
The one with the factory worker?
Yeah, he was suing his boss because he said he got hurt, but he was actually doing it on purpose to get money from the insurance.
Oh, yeah. That was a tough one. Mma Ramotswe had to make some hard choices there. At first, she told Hector, the factory owner, he should just pay the guy.
Really?
Yeah, because it would be so hard to prove Solomon was lying.
Oh, I see.
But Hector refused. He said it wasn't fair, that he shouldn't have to pay for something he didn't do.
It's hard, isn't it? Do you do what's practical or do you fight for what's right?
It is.
And Mma Ramotswe, she could have just walked away, but she didn't. She decided to help, even though it would be difficult. It shows how much she cares about truth and fairness.
It does. But speaking of tough cases,
Mm-hmm.
remember that leather pouch that Mr. JLB Mattacone found?
Oh, yeah. In the car he was fixing?
A bone, a piece of skin, some weird liquid. It was definitely creepy.
That was something else. It takes us into a whole different world.
The world of witchcraft. It's something a lot of people might not understand. But McCall Smith, he handles it really well. He shows us how complicated it is, how it's part of African culture. It's not just about, hocus pocus.
He helps us see it through Mma Ramotswe's eyes, you know, how these beliefs are still really strong, even though things are changing.
Exactly. And remember, the pouch belonged to Charlie Gotso. He's rich and powerful.
Yeah.
And when Mr. JLB Mattacone tries to give it back, Gotso lies to him, threatens him even. He obviously doesn't want anyone to know what he's doing.
So, of course, Mma Ramotswe has to get involved.
Of course. She starts looking into Solomon Moretzi, the guy from the factory.
Oh, right.
And she finds out he's been doing this insurance scam for a while. It makes her think maybe Gotso's behind it all. Like he's using these people.
Oh, wow.
But then things get really scary. Mma Ramotswe finds out that the bone in the pouch is from a child.
Yeah.
Suddenly, it's not just about insurance scams anymore.
It's like maybe there are these ritual killings happening or kids being used for something terrible.
It's a chilling thought. And it shows you that even in a place as beautiful as Botswana, there's still darkness.
Yeah. But even with all this dark stuff happening, there are still moments of light in the book. Like when Mma Ramotswe visits Dr. Bapetsi, her old friend. I loved their conversation about women and power.
Oh, I know. Mma Ramotswe said if more women were in charge, there wouldn't be as many wars. Because women are more practical.
It might be a little idealistic, but you can see she really believes women can make the world a better place.
She does. But Dr. Bapetsi, he's more realistic, He points out that there have been women leaders who started wars too. It just goes to show that things aren't always so simple when it comes to men and women, or who makes a good leader.
It's such a great conversation. It really shows you how things are changing between men and women in Botswana.
They are. And as we move on to the last part of our deep dive, just remember that this case with Charlie Gotso and that missing child's bone, it's not over yet. There's more to come. It's going to get really intense, and it's going to push Mma Ramotswe to her limits.
That case with Charlie Gotso and that bone, it was pretty scary. But before we get back to that, there was another case that really stuck with me. The one with the doctor.
Oh, right. Dr. Commodi.
Yeah. Mma Ramotswe was doing a favor for her friend, Dr. Bapetsi.
It seemed simple enough at first, like maybe the doctor was doing something wrong. But then it became this whole thing about who you are and what you want in life.
Yeah, Dr. Bapetsi thought Dr. Commodi was taking medicine from the hospital. Maybe he was addicted or something.
Right.
So Mma Ramotswe said she'd look into it. She felt like she owed Dr. Bapetsi. He was so kind to her dad when he was sick.
It just shows you how much Mma Ramotswe values loyalty and giving back. That's a big part of life in Botswana.
It is. But then she starts watching this Dr. Commodi and, well, let's just say, it wasn't what anyone expected.
Oh, I know.
It turns out there were two Dr. Commodis, identical twins, and they were both pretending to be the same doctor. Can you believe it?
I know. They had everyone fooled. It's kind of funny, but it's also pretty serious. I mean, what if something bad had happened to a patient?
Mma Ramotswe had a tough choice to make. Should she tell everyone the truth and ruin their careers? Or could she find another way? A kinder way?
It's amazing how she always manages to find the good in people.
She convinced Dr. Bapetsi to give them both jobs. Separate jobs so they could keep being doctors, but legally this time.
She found a way for everyone to win.
Yeah.
It's like, even when someone messes up, there's always a chance to do the right thing.
Yeah. Okay, so back to Charlie Gotso. And that bone. McCall Smith really keeps you guessing throughout the whole book. He gives you these little hints that something bad is going on with Gotso.
Oh.
And you just want to know the truth, just like Mma Ramotswe. And then she finally confronts him, demands he gives her back what he stole.
She's so brave, standing up to this powerful man. She wasn't afraid at all. It shows you what she's made of.
And then Gotso just backs down. He claims that stuff in the pouch was just medicine, traditional medicine, and that someone was trying to, sabotage him to hurt his chances of getting elected.
Interesting. It makes you think about how power works in Botswana. Even someone like Gotso, with all his money and influence, he's still worried about things like witchcraft.
But we never find out for sure what happened to that child, what that bone was all about. It's almost like McCall Smith leaves it there on purpose, like to remind us that some things will always be a mystery.
I think you're right. He's showing us that the world isn't simple. There's good and bad everywhere, even in a place like Botswana.
And that's what makes the No One Ladies Detective Agency so good, I think. You have all these beautiful things and then these dark, scary things. It's a story about people and how strong they can be, but it also reminds you that there are mysteries out there that we may never solve.
Absolutely. And if there's one thing I hope everyone remembers from this deep dive, it's to pay attention. McCall Smith, he writes in a way that seems simple, but there's so much under the surface.
Yeah.
All those little details, those tiny moments, they tell you so much about what it's really like to live in Botswana.
It's like those blue distances, right?
Yes. There's so much more to them than just empty space. It's about history, culture, people overcoming challenges. It's all there, waiting for you to see it.
So next time you find yourself looking at a big, wide-open sky, maybe you're sipping some bush tea. Think about Mma Ramotswe. Think about her kindness, her wisdom, how she never gives up on trying to make the world a better place, even if it's just one little case at a time.
And maybe, just maybe, you'll want to go on your own adventure. Discover Botswana for yourself. Until next time, happy reading.
Bye, everyone.